He stands, he turns, when suddenly a wild Hans Niemann appears on stage, just moments away from an encounter with Magnus Carlsen. Are we going to see a big old chess fight? No, we're not. They glide on past there. Real scenes at Grenke chess tournament. It's freestyle chess, and Magnus Carlsen, the world number one, also known today as Messiah Chocolatsen, is doing something incredible. I've got the most insane stats to bring you at the end of this video here, a lifetime record broken by Magnus. But first we're diving in on not one but 4 of his epic chess games played this weekend. Let's dive in on number 1. It's Etienne Bacrot with the white pieces, the guy who got himself a selfie with Magnus just before the game started. That's how much of a goat Magnus is. Even the other top guys want a selfie with bro. We see the pawn push on the first move here, the king's pawn, but of course the pieces are shuffled up. Magnus also fights for the centre. The knight comes out, and look at this. We get some move 2, castling, the 000 from Etienne as well, and we got ourselves a rooktangle, one of the best sights in the business. Magnus plays the stinky f6, opens his bishop, and now we see Etienne blast off like Katy Perry and the astronauts there, going for the center of the board. Magnus takes, knight recaptures here, and is there anything forlorner than a knight in the corner? Get it into the game. We see this one developing too. Magnus fights to the center, captures a pair of rooks going into the blender here, knight takes back, and bang. It's Etienne who kicks this guy first, stumbling forward, don't worry, supported by the bishop from afar. Apparently g3 is best here, but no, we get the advance of the a-pawn, trying to free up this miserable lady in the corner, but guess what? Not the best. Magnus fights back with this one, opening his own queen. Now g3, but f5, and Magnus just plays this series of like 5 brilliant moves now in a row. Now that pony's struggling for hops. You know, forward squares are taken. If you try and go here and upon h6, then back into here, well, you've got problems, and you don't really want to be coming back here. Gets clumsy. So this is actually one of the best moves, but it now gets super sharp. The pawn is pinned. So what does Magnus do? Does he go g6 to defend? No, he snaps this one off the board. Awesome calculation. If takes, then queen takes. This is the point. Black's doing really well. So not played. Instead, we get bishop takes with check. Magnus drops back, and we're getting this situation where he's given up a rook but for 2 minor pieces. Queen c6 does some defensive work. Now the knight hops forward, looking to go to Forktown, population Magnus, so he gets out the forking way with the king, but not with the queen. This one rotates back, hits 2. Magnus saves the lady, normally loves a queen sack, but here it's not sound. The rook does drop, but now after bishop takes, we don't see knight takes. It was simply the best move. Instead, the absolutely terrible pawn to b3 is played, and it devilishly exposes the king, and Magnus makes Etienne pay here. You know, you don't want these pieces stuck on the back row. So we see check played, and look at the king. It's boxed in, right? Don't want to be giving your queen up, of course. So the king steps to b1 here. And now here's the point. Sorry, I've got a fly on my screen. I had to get rid of that. Magnus doesn't move the knight here, which is attacked and defending the bishop. You know, how do you save everything? He plays queen h5. I mean, this is some serious calculation to go with the positional understanding. Rook's hit, you know, you can't take the knight or the rook drops, and it's even a checkmate. So that one saves itself, lifts up the board, but now let's run with the same motif, the back rank issues. Now we get queen h3, and if you take here, you're getting branked with queen f1 check, rook blocks, and look at that. What a miserable queen on the a2 square. So we come back here. That's why the rook now slides back to cover the invasion, but now brilliancy, uncorked by Magnus. Somehow it all just swirls together in this beautiful pie. He goes rook d2 check, or knight d2 rather, and of course you can't take, or once again the queen invades and mates the king. So the king steps over here. I mean, look at this miserable couple. You know, who wants to hang out with them? Now we get bishop b4, and again it threatens a nasty check. If knight takes bishop, you check here, and you're actually winning the white queen because the king can't move. You'd have to block like that. Therefore, queen b2 played. But now Magnus saves the bishop with tempo against the rook. Just awesome calculation. Rook c1, and now look at this. All the pieces come into the party. One pair is exchanged, yes, but still Magnus gets this epic invasion going after bishop d2, kicking the rook unceremoniously, and now queen g2. You know, Kasparov said, just keep attacking the enemy pieces and they will crack like an Easter egg. I mean, he said most of that quote, not all of it. Probably not, probably, maybe. We now see an attack on this queen. No, we don't, sorry. A defense of the king. The knight attacks it. Now we see bishop e4 going for the threat down here. And after bishop c3, trying to exchange more pieces, Magnus just slides back here. And we see a resignation, because if you try and block with the rook, well, of course, it gets taken. You can't block with the queen. You know, how do you get back? You don't, simply. And it's actually a checkmate in 7. Here's the best way to stave it off, but here's how you could shut the trap. You have to give the queen, and then you still get mated anyway. Absolutely brutal. That was round 4. Let's now jump to round 5 here. So this is a guy called Viktor Mikhailevsky. He's the only player I've never heard of before. 2500 Grandmaster. Now this game here, the pieces aren't that jumbled. Only king and queen reversed and knight and rook on the right hand side of the board. But still, the game gets a bit weird because yes, it starts off like an Italian sort of game, but now we see d3 and you should develop a knight, but queen e7 selected, trying to get that quick castles in, but Magnus can now develop. You don't want to see that one land there, so it's covered. Now he develops. You don't want to see it land there, so it's covered. And now he develops again, and already on move 6, Magnus has got his bits out, 4 of them here, and Victor's still struggling to get castle. Now he does get the king pickled to safety, but Magnus can now take. We get the c-pawn recapturing, or a double c-pawn now I should say, after d takes, and after Magnus plays a4, when he does it, it's good. The knight develops, queen e3 targets this one, and therefore after the bishop develops, captures, you can't take with the queen or the pawn drops. So this one takes, leaves black with this structure that only a mother could love, and Magnus can set up the old party hat pawn formation. He's having some fun. He spins this one around, and this is a nice sort of randomizing move, right? Pawn c4 to stop the knight blockading that square, and after captures you open the king, you check it. Now it's blocked like this, but the queen invades and it hits 2 pawns. Remember, this knight is pinned, so the king sidesteps, covers both. Now the seahorse is spawned here. Magnus goes g3 to cover a hop. We get this double stack prepared, rook d1, this one comes over. Magnus whispers, do you even rook lift, bro? And he sets up this devilish trap. You know, if you go say pawn h6 here, now you can play this weird looking knight retreat move, and you actually hit the queen, and where's it going? How do you stay with this guy? If here, then a5, and you can't stay with the knight. If here, then you run into b4. You got issues. Therefore, a5 is important. Now if you drop, well, there's no a5, you know, you shut down those ideas. So knight b3 was played, but still Victor cracks here under the pressure. What should he do? Well, taking here is simply best, and that is how the line could proceed, you know, something like this. This is how we could see it, and it's roughly level here, but fine, we drop back. not played. Instead, we get the outlandish, the Magnus effect. Queen takes on c3. It sacrifices a queen for these triple pawns, the Irish pawns as they call them. Now you can take here, that's knight and rook for the lady, shattered structure. But after captures, rook takes back, you're not checkmating that king, and meanwhile Magnus himself is invading. First he plays this great pawn push. Now if you invade, you're ready to run with the king. You can play this, create a Luft square. So we didn't see that invasion. Instead takes on h2. Magnus chops here. The rook's double stack on the second, about to get kebabbed, but now we see the rook just calmly slide over. Yes, there's a check, but the king moves up the board, hides away on the c4 square, as we're now about to see. And the finish to this game is stunning, because when the queen is attacked, does Magnus move it to a sensible square like here? No, he doesn't. He plays the swashbuckling, queen takes on e2, because after rook takes here, he's seen the power of his pawns, especially the c pawn. But this is some serious deep chess understanding. Now what if king f7 to hit the rook, cover this knight here? Well, then you can go slack bang wallop and take that one off. King recaptures and you run away with the pawn. How do you get back? Answer is you don't. You make that pony there, game over. What if instead you try and come here? No good. You make that bishop, game over. So therefore no king f7. Instead we see the knight on f8, no mate. But Magnus has got bigger plans. He wants to make a baby girl. Now he brings the rook over to win another pawn. And after the king steps in, he cuts it like a karate chopping Bruce Lee chess guy. Now this a pawn's running too, and it's absolutely terminal. I mean, it looks so slow motion. How can this be fast enough? But it isn't. It's good. How does the rook get back? How does the knight get back? How does the king cover? I mean, what a paralysis. We see rook takes on f3, a6, knight d8, and now this great finish, reminiscent of the queen sacrifice. Rook takes on d8. I mean, this is some seriously beautiful chess. Resignation came because after a7, you just cannot stop the baby girl. You can't get over. Figure out a way. You can't get over. Crazy stuff. Such a good game. We now move on to here. A Wonder Liang. These were played today, 20th of April. It's Easter Sunday. He opens here by bringing the knight into the game and he gets absolutely smashed. But is it a wonder? Magnus is the world number one. He pushes the pawn one square, opens the bishop. Now we see a wonder copy in here. G6 opens the queen, e4, e5, and both players castle once more just to set up the rook tangle. We love it. Now we get an expansion in the center, and after captures, already we see a very strong grandmaster play 3 mistakes in a row here. I mean, this format is just blowing their mind. What should you do? Take with the knight. I mean, when you see the all-powerful engine say it, you can understand it. There's no pawn push here. If you ever push here, well, that's a massive weakening of this square, of course. So fine, we can understand it. But instead, this was played. Magnus strikes at the center. We see an expansion, not the best. Knight develops. And now another poor move here. Just to show you, by the way, what if this pawn pushes forward? Well, you're just overextending the pawns, basically. Black's got a great game here. We'll run it back because this wasn't played. h3 instead. Ideas now after d6 of bishop h2. But after everything goes into the blender on e5, don't worry, the queen's not lost. We see bishop takes, pawn recaptures. Magnus gets to take with check, drags the king out into the open because the rook's got to stay with the pawn. And now when he brings the knight into the game, suddenly it's his pieces just coming with the initiative against this weak pawn. The queen tries to activate. h5 from Magnus, queen g3, pawn defended. h4 now shuts down any further push of this one. And after rook d8 check, the king sidestepping, it's now Magnus who spawns the seahorse. He's in the danger zone and more importantly pressuring this guy. We see the bishop develop. Rook d5 piles on that pressure, and if you go for f4, well, guess what? Now a new pawn's dropping off the board. base of the chain, these two converging, and there's no knight to bring round to e2. You can't get anything round. It's just not working. Why are Magnus's feces plowing into the attack better than a wonder's here? I don't know, but somehow they're just all playing better than the white ones. So we come back, we see queen c3, tactical stuff, but this is where Magnus combines the tactics with the positional. He plays rook takes on e5. Take my knight, no worries, I'll take your rook with check. Okay, well what happens then if after takes I take your rook first? Well, now the knight recaptures and you save it. Beautiful stuff. So instead we see knight e3. Now the knight drops back to c7. And although it looks like it's moving in the wrong direction, it's opening the bishop, then it's going to hop forward into one of these key squares. So we see takes on c4, takes the rook with check, queen recaptures, and bishop takes back. This is how you win back the piece. Now the queen activates here. Magnus pushes p, the knight centralizes, Magnus activates and defends. Finally, the lady leaves the corner. It's move 23, and you should actually protect this pawn on the a file here. Pawn a3, let's say. But instead, we see knight f3 played, allowing Magnus to take in the corner, and the bishop's not trapped. If you go for this one, you check down here, and long story short, you can extricate the bishop, you hunt the white king. It's not good. So we see queen e5, offering an exchange. Normally Magnus loves to grind like a grandma deep in the endgame, but not here. He keeps them on, wants to hunt this guy. Now queen d6, but Magnus defends and attacks at the same time. Queen takes the base of the chain, but check. King goes, no it doesn't, sorry, bishop blocks, king d2, technically preferred, although this drops with check. Very understandable why it wasn't played, but after bishop b3, we see resignation here from a wonder. He's just had enough, 28 moves in. And the problem here is that if you go queen d6 to cover stuff, well now you can take, queen takes, you pick up here, and Magnus is 2 pawns ahead and with a dominant position, because this king is exposed, this king's safe, this knight can soon join in a really deadly way, and the pawns can start running. When you really start clicking deep on the lines, that's the general themes. So he just resigns, the Magnus effect. He's fed up. And now to our final game. This is round 7 here. Parham Magsudlu, a guy in the form of his life right now, just won a tournament. But Magnus, look at this. He opens with pawn c3. He's somehow understanding that at times it's good to push a pawn 1 square in these structures. He's like in the Matrix where they're downloading the helicopter pilot's license, right? He's just downloading all the freestyle stuff right now. Got it deep in his head, exposing all the other players for their weaknesses, and he's going deep on freestyle. He's just got it down. f4. Now we see takes, and he doesn't recapture. Knight d3 here, and if you try and hold on to the pawn like this, you can undermine like this. Classic idea, if I could push it, and you can't support like this. Obviously the rook drops after the exchange, and look at this, same thing, but now bishop d4. I mean, the motifs and tactics straight out the opening are just so difficult to keep up with. So this is why you can't support the pawn. So c6 was played. Now we get the early castle once more. d5, knight b3. Now this knight develops into the game, and it's pins galore, because Magnus walks into one, but you can't quite take advantage. There's always going to be a check. So we do see the queen cover the king, hit a pawn, create some weird threats. So Magnus goes bishop c5, and now it's the black knight that can't move so easily. Magnus is pinning the knight to the enemy queen. So we see knight b6 played. Magnus now centralizes, the square is covered, and knight e5. It's move 9, and all his pieces are swarming already. Knight d7, the best defensive move, but the very stinky f6 is played, and there's so many different themes going on here. It hits the knight. If you retreat it, then black's doing fine, but there are tactical shots in the air now. You could even look at sacking a bishop here, but Magnus goes for a different move, the best. What does he do here? Picks up that knight, and he sacrifices it on c6. It's given the double exclam because after captures, knight takes, there's a lot going on. You know, it's not just about the attack on these two, the forkaroo, but also this is now pressured and it defends the knight, which is attacked twice. And there's ideas of queen takes here, hitting a loose rook. So this was played. It's the best move. You could take on f6 already. You could take on b8. There's too much going on. We're going to stick with the game. The check was played. The king steps up the board. Now the rook drops. Queen recaptures. And the cool and calm, pawn h4. No one's got a clue going what's going on. Not the commentators, not the players, except Magnus, least of all me. We're just going to enjoy the moves. Bishop e6 is played here. h5 gains some space. This one glides past like a ship in the night. And now Magnus brings that rook to pressure on this backwards pawn. The knight hops forward, and it's really nice counterplay here from Parham. Hits the queen, pawn attacked, but you can't defend it in any good way. You know, if the rook comes, it gets taken. You can't bring the king over, of course. If you push it, well, the bishop's crashing through and you're taken with check and stuff. So we see a great counterplay move. Knight a4, normally a boo-boo to stick it on the edge, but Magnus does go wrong in a very complicated tactical position. b3, one of the top moves apparently, or e4, fine. But Magnus plays this bishop f5, saying take on c5, I'll recapture with the queen, no problem. And of course it does look like black is getting dragged out into the open, but instead we see bishop f4, taking here was technically best, by the way. This one cuts the connection here, threatens to take. Does Magnus take here or anything, or g3? No. He plays the crazy queen d4. I mean, the game's exploding. They're both burning oodles of time here. And the basic point is that if you now take the free bishop offered, well, now you can check the king here. And after the knight blocks and it covers the bishop also, well, you could take, or you can even play this one. Rook takes, it's the top move. You know, we'll pause it here. But now, of course, you've removed the defender of the knight. Here's one crazy line, blah, blah, blah. White emerges a bit better. So this is the basic reason you can't capture that bishop. The queen crashes through. So what do we see? Best again was this, but king c6 selected. Magnus does oblige this exchange of prisoners here, and now this shows some serious chess understanding, right? You know, Magnus can see that the black pieces are just binding his rooks. They're completely tied down, wading through quicksand. So what does he do? He picks up one of the rooks and just smashes off this monster of a bishop. It's awesome chess understanding because it then sets up this double whammy follow-up. This is so cool. Bishop takes with check. I guess this one was kind of offside and dead anyway. I don't know. But this is the way the game goes. It drags the queen out basically, allows this check here, and this is a loose guy. Loose pieces drop off, as they say. It leaves Parham with this difficult choice. Take here, attack the white king, or take this h-pawn, which soon becomes dangerous. Now this one was selected. It is technically the best move. Also covers this guy in case Magnus checks. He, however, picks up this pawn after check, king c2, queen setting up the x-ray. He just ignores it after check and wins this pawn, king b7 best. Let's stick with the game. But it now allows black some counter chances, right? You can do the discoveries. However, Magnus has got the running past h-pawn. You do first have to watch this check, winning a knight. So Parham steps back. He again threatens to win the knight. Parham covers it. Magnus runs the pawn. Finally, we see the discovered check. But this is the best that could be done. Give it like this, but not actually win material. King c1 is played, and here, sadly, the game ends because Parham loses on time. He's trying to figure it out. Do you take here with check? Do you go down here and check? By the way, there's no checkmate because the queen covers the square from afar. Now, this was technically the best move. Here's how the line could go. You know, let's run it through a bit. Apparently not taking his best, but come back and check. Here's one sample line. King runs away. White should be doing well, but I don't know. This is some nuts. I mean, look at that for the best move. If takes, then you win the queen, blah, blah, blah. Absolute ninja lines. This was the final position. Sad end to an absolutely incredible game. That was the 4th win of Magnus's in the last 4 rounds. He sits atop the tournament. Thanks a lot for sticking with this video. If you did so, hope you enjoyed those mangalins. And if you want to see some more awesome chess, then have a look at the video on screen. Thanks a lot and see you soon. Cheers.